Features of oligopoly. We understood the competition of the market in terms of perfect market, monopoly market, and in between monopoly and perfect, we understood monopolistic market. Now, the next question that comes up is, how do we fix the prices of goods like automobiles or ships or petroleum or cement or steel or aircrafts? How are the prices of these kind of fixed, and what should be the output of these kind of firms? So this cannot be explained by perfect market, by monopoly market, or by monopolistic market. So we have another form of market called oligopoly. Now in this presentation, I shall only explain to you the features of oligopoly. There are just a few firms, 3, 4, 5. That's all that this competition can hold. It would mean that these few firms account for quite a significant portion of the total output. They're quite competitive, and each firm produces in such a way that they are in severe competition with the other firm, and each firm manipulates both the price and the output to stay afloat in that particular group. And it is also known as competition among the few. So very severe competition, but there are just few firms in that particular market. We can also divide oligopoly into two forms, the pure oligopoly and the imperfect oligopoly. Imperfect oligopoly is when products are differentiated, like automobiles, whereas in the case of pure monopoly, we understand that the products are homogeneous in that sense. It could be that of steel or cement. Under this oligopoly market, one of the very important features that we discover is that of interdependence. Firms are highly dependent on each other. So the profit of one firm depends upon the behavior of the other firm in that particular group. It would mean that a firm cannot decide its output and price on its own. It is dependent upon the potential behavior of the other firm. It would mean that it not only has to consider its own decision-making process, but it has to include in its decision-making process the possible decision-making process of the other firm. And every firm in this sense keeps a very close watch on the activities of the rival firm. Now, there can be two ways also in which this can show itself. The firms may cooperate with each other, or firms may even very fiercely compete with each other. Professor Baumel makes an interesting statement here. Under these circumstances, a very wide variety of behavioral patterns becomes possible. So we have on one hand the competition, on the other hand we have cooperation. Between competition and cooperation, we can have a series of behavior, different shades of behavior between these two extremes. And the rivals may decide to get together and cooperate in the pursuit of objectives so far as the law permits. So they are also these kind of firms, since they are huge firms, they are also limited by the legal systems of that country. And it could go to an extreme also, in which case they may even, the rivals could even fight each other so much that one of them would finally exit the market, or they just get absorbed by the existing firm. So this is something which we will see when we look into the working of this oligopoly market. Third one is a barrier to entry. The barrier to entry can be price barriers and non-price barriers. So when we talk about barriers, it is purposefully done. The barriers are deliberately created, and these deliberately created barriers are such that it makes extremely difficult for any firm to freshly enter this particular group. And the requirements of the capital for setting up these firms are huge, and so also their setup costs are huge. Then they also practice limit pricing, in which case what they would do is they produce much more than what is required for the market. They would flood the market and they would start selling at such a low price that a new entrant will be deterred by this kind of a behavior of the existing firm and may not be able to make the profit that is expecting to make, and thus may not enter this market at all. There could be patents, there could be access to technology, there could be knowledge that the firm has about its customers or about the production process, which again has the advantage to that firm. And in that way, the new firm will have to start everything fresh, which is very difficult for firms to do. And we also find that firms may have access to certain kinds of resources. For example, the currently the Air India itself is in that condition where it has got access to many airports in the world. So even if a new firm goes to replace that, it has not been possible to do that simply because its access to resources are to markets are very huge. It also can be controlling of the air. It have access to the airport, or it could be that mobile companies have got access to spectrum. These can be other reasons why oligopoly firms will prohibit others from entering into the market. Now, firms can practice selling and advertising cost. Now, selling and advertising costs are not directly price behavior, they are non price interventions because the firm does not want to compete with this rival firm in terms of prices because it does not know how that other firm will behave. So instead of going into the price changes, what this firm would do is it may enter into just advertisements and selling cost. And Baumel says it is only under oligopoly you can understand what has been the level of advertisement in this kind of firm's survival and growth. And the money spent on research and development can be so huge that the other firm intending to enter that industry will not be able to spend. And it also, when such huge amount of money is spent on advertising, then it means that the firm is financially very sound, and it gives a different kind of a message to the competitive firm. You can see that when we find advertisements for the car in the market, or you could see the in the recent spate you can find those huge apartment complexes that are coming up. Essentially they are owned by three or four kinds of oligopoly firms. So they have their own advertisements which are so huge that the rival firms may be able to do it or may not be able to spend such huge amounts of money. They also practice very vigorous sales promotion activities and techniques so that they can promote their sales and get more customers. Such kind of advertising brings very strong brand, and they lock in the customers in some form or the other, and these customers become loyal to that particular brand. This loyalty also deters others from entry into this particular market. There's also something of a group behavior among firms. Sometimes the firms, that is what we are seeing. Sometimes they compete in such a way that they could just kill the other firm from continuing in the market. At other times, the firms can behave like a group, in which case the firms will join together, they will take common decisions, and to the consumers, they will project as all the firms are doing just the same. And this kind of behavior is taken up when they find that that behavior is in the interest of all the firms. So interest of instead of competing with each other, they think that uh, cooperating with each other is important. So firms tend to behave as though they are a single firm, even though they retain their independence in carrying out their economic activities. Indeterminateness of the demand curve. Now, in the perfect market, perfect market, monopoly, and monopolistic market, we found that there are special positions of the demand curve. In the case of perfect market, it was a horizontal straight line. In the case of monopoly, we had a downward sloping, relatively inelastic curve. And in the case of monopolistic market, we found that the demand curve is downward sloping but has got a relatively more elastic nature. Now, in this particular case, since there is so much of competition and cooperation among firms, it is very difficult to estimate how the demand curve for the market will be. And this interdependence of the rival creates problem as much as their competition creates trouble to determine the demand for these kind of commodities. Uncertainty regarding the reaction of their rivals. And the problem is, if firm A changes its price, will B, C, and D change the price? Will it keep the same? Will it lower the price? Will it increase the price? It's just left to the firms to experience it rather than even plan it, because that behavior is not known to the firm which is making the change. It has to take the risk of making that particular change. It is not possible for the demand curve to be determined for a firm, and therefore we have a concept of a kinked demand curve, which again we shall see in the following chapter on presentation on the models. Now, this oligopoly market is very interesting for a management student, mainly because in management they develop strategic thinking, and that strategic thinking originates from the idea of this oligopoly firm to see how firms actually behave in real time. So the Boeing prices or the Airbus prices or the Spectrum prices, all these are not as easily fixed as it was possible to fix it under the monopolistic market, or of course the perfect market had no problem in fixing the price. So oligopoly market is a very complicated market scenario. There is not one way to understand the market. There are multiple ways to understand how firms in this market behave. So thank you.